Hiya there, folks. Welcome to episode 15 of Nintendo Deep Dive. My name is Carl. I am the creator and host of this podcast. To those uninitiated, Nintendo Deep Dive is a retrospective focused Nintendo show all about retro Nintendo games and retro Nintendo machines, often featuring retrospective reviews. To those listening via audio platforms, these episodes are also available with video on YouTube under Nintendo Deep Dive. Now for episode 15 itself, only one thing on the agenda for today, and that is a Paper Mario review. So, let us jump into that right away. Paper Mario, released for the N64 in North American markets on February 5th, 2001, and developed by Intelligent Systems Co. Limited. There are 4 credited directors according to Wikipedia: Ryota Kawade, Toshitaka Muramatsu, Takahiro Ogi, and Hironobu Suzuki. Cited designers are Kenji Nakajima and Karoyu Kita, with art done by Naohiko Aoyama and writing credited to Kumiko Takeda and Kaori Aoki. And lastly, the composer was Yuka Tsujiyoko. Tsujiyoko did a lot of work for Intelligent Systems prior to this, going back to the first Fire Emblem, and has continued with them to this day. Kawade would go on to direct the next 2 Paper Marios, whereas Muramatsu remains at Intelligent Systems as well, as a prominent graphic designer. Ogi or Oji would work on FE Path of Radiance as event director, whatever that means, and Suzuki would remain with the company as well. As for the designer Nakajima, though no longer at Intelligent Systems, they have remained with Paper Mario in a managerial role, while Kita has continued on with Intelligent Systems as a programmer and even as a composer for Cubivore on the GameCube. I could not find too much additional info for the writers, Takeda and Aoki, but the latter shares a name with a Japanese model, and the former worked on Fire Emblem prior. So that is the pedigree of Paper Mario. But to move past the individual team members and look at the company itself, I am 99% sure that this is the only N64 title under their belt. Actually, I looked it up, scratch that. I'm 100% sure of that. In January 2000, 3+ years after the N64 was released, the company released a Fire Emblem on the Super Famicom, which it makes me think that they had low regard for this Ultra 64. Then again, most of Intelligent Systems' work at this time never left Japan, and the N64 was less popular than the Saturn over there. So perhaps it was just business. Whatever the case, I'm proud of them for skipping the N64 for so long, because yeah, the Super Nintendo was a better system, and good on them for making another game for that machine. Regardless, their sole offering for the system proved to be not only a fitting swan song, but a perennial classic as well. At least many people see it that way. As for my thoughts on Paper Mario, some of which I have already dispensed back when I was reviewing Wii games, they are not too complicated and can be divided into 2 main categories. The gameplay and the aesthetic. We will start with the aesthetic. As the name would suggest, the setting and characters take after the likeness of paper, as seen by Mario and NPCs being as flat as paper, while the world around them takes after a scene from a pop-up picture book. I think the impetus for this art style was not to pursue an arts and crafts look, as was the case in many Goodfield developed games, but rather to frame this game as a bedtime story rendition of the familiar Mario adventure. Later Paper Mario games would definitely place greater emphasis on their material construction, but I appreciate that the first game did not overemphasize that aspect. Granted, it is still very much a key aspect of the aesthetic, but I do not see or believe it to be the focus of the visuals, despite it being the key descriptor of the game's given name. I mean, it is an effective descriptor. Speaking to the quality of the visuals, they are simply excellent. I do not believe that I have hidden my distaste for N64 graphics. Barring a few like Donkey Kong 64 and Wave Race 64, the look of N64 games is a barrier of entry for those not already inundated with the system and its library. But as for Paper Mario, it is not just a great looking N64 game, but simply a great looking game. Period. It is not necessarily timeless. If played on HD screens, the outlines of each character are a touch rough, but even then, if I was playing this on its intended system at its intended resolution, that would not be a factor. Otherwise, any limitations of the N64 are perfectly in line with the inherent limitations of the paper construction concept. Brick and grass textures would be flat if they were painted onto paper, and buildings would be of simple geometry. It all aligns. One flourish I especially like is whenever Mario enters a building, there is a transition where the walls fold down and the roof lifts up and back, as if a paper structure was being collapsed to show its interior. Of course, the character designs are very good also, being original without deviating from the Mario brand. Take for a slightly boring instance, Cammy. Looks similar to Kamek, but deviates enough with the big glasses, big hair, and purple attire. Nothing off-brand looking about her. I think my favorite looking character is Bo's butler, Bootler, who is a mild-mannered, mustached, elderly-looking Boo with tidy, parted down the middle hair, and demonstrating a very butlerly expression as his default. Though there is a moment where his button-down demeanor gives way to a sharp-teethed jump scare face, which actually frightened little old me, and that's not hard to do. I don't like scary things, so it doesn't say much, but you know. Anyway, it served as a good reminder that he is a Boo, while also highlighting the contradiction of a mild-mannered Boo, and that is why I enjoy his character design. I could delve into other character designs as well, but I do not think that is necessary. And, you know, obviously, it's a known thing that the character designs of Paper Mario games are, well, they're not really great. They were really great. And it continues to be something of contention with the later releases as they have decided to, they being some of the bigger executives at Nintendo, they decided that the team should take as many pre-existing character models from the Mario universe rather than making their own new ones. Which is, I mean, there's some cause for that to some degree, but not within Paper Mario itself. As I said, the characters look like Mario characters. Just, you know, original, as they should. There's no clash. But ever since Sticker Star, it's a lot of multicolored toads populating the Paper Mario worlds. Um, and people bemoan that on account of just how great these characters looked. Anyway, beyond the paper aesthetic, the location themes they pick for this game are fairly right down the middle, such as Dry Desert, a haunted Boo Mansion, a jungle island of Yoshi's, and of course Peach's Castle. But it all works with each place being very distinct from the other, with any lingering familiarities being counteracted by the novelty of the pop-up picture book aesthetic. That being said, my favorite locale in the game is a slight departure from the typical Mario themes. Tubba Blubba's castle and the Boo Village outside of it take after a medieval fairy tale with assets like thatch roof huts and four-armed windmills. Though the land is really run down with desaturated brown colors, all the thatch roof huts have a dangerous lean with their doors barely on their hinges. All the trees have had the boughs snapped off, and there is an evil wind passing through. It is very dreary, not in a gritty way, but I like the contrast between this location's desaturation and the rest of the game's saturation. And more than just the look, the gameplay and characterization are at their best within this entire chapter. Flower Field is very attractive with an aesthetic look that looks to be deprived from Yoshi's Island. Not that I can perfectly describe Yoshi's Island's aesthetic, but Flower Fields is certainly derived from it. There are also great landmarks such as the Sun Tower and the Cistern and the sparkly crystal tree, whose leaves are like chandelier pendulogues. All of this to say, the game is a treat to behold. As for music, it is all good, but I cannot put my finger on any standouts. Perhaps Shooting Star Summit. It is more cozy than catchy, as are many of the songs in the game, but, still very nice. Then there's the world themes, and just as those worlds take after pre-existing visual motifs found in Mario platformers, so also do the musical motifs. So nothing too exciting. Frankly, I never found the music to be anything beyond charming and pleasant, being honest. Moving on, though, as I said before, my thoughts occupy two main categories. But before I delve into the second category, I should touch on the story and its structure. After Bowser steals the Star Rod and imprisons the 7 Star Spirits, he thrashes Mario and absconds away with both Peach in her castle, and the story unfolds from there in typical Mario fashion. There are 8 chapters in the game, with each one seeing Mario rescue a Star Spirit, but positioned between these chapters are sections where you play as Peach. I would say that many people count these in-between moments as some of the best in the game, and I would not disparage that take. They offer a nice change of pace from the RPG battles and overworld questing, exchanging all that for light stealth and fun antics. I think the instance I have heard most brought up is the one where you bake a cake for Gourmet Guy, which is another great character design, by the way. The act of baking the cake, while very basic, is also very organic, much in the way that parts of Earthbound were, if you are familiar. It is the simple act of fetching the called out ingredient from wherever it is in the kitchen and then adding it to the mixing bowl, as you would in real life. You then beat the batter by mashing A. Then once the batter is ready, you transfer it from the bowl to a cake pan. and then are instructed to put it in the oven and take it out after 1 minute. No timer or meter. You just have to count to a minute. Or use a watch. Whatever. But you need to wait a full minute. Or maybe it's 30 seconds. Doesn't matter. But you need to wait that exact amount of time before pulling it out. Otherwise, Gourmet Guy rejects it and you have to restart the process. After you have removed the cake, you can top it with cream and strawberries. Or you can't. It's not an optional thing. You top it with cream and strawberries and carry it off to Gourmet Guy. I enjoy how mundanely methodical this part is, and it does feel truly organic. It is definitely the highlight of these intermissions. As for the story overall, it is not exactly plot heavy or even terribly interesting, but the writing is really good. Not that I have examples off the top of my head. At the outset, other people led me to believe it was laugh out loud funny, but I never did more than grin at the game's dialogue. It is definitely charming, and it never came off as talky and pointless, like, say, Pikmin 4's writing. Nevertheless, RPGs more so than other genres need stories that really resonate with their players. After all, those long, pregnant pauses between main story beats really lend to a story, as they amplify the sense of progress by giving a great sense of distance in your journey, even if the actual in-game distance was much smaller. It is a good example of delayed gratification. But the story has to deliver, and I'm not sure Paper Mario's story is interesting enough to really deliver. It definitely delivers in terms of visual progression within the adventure, but aside from the introduction of new helpers, the main narrative has little development or expansion. With that said, I shall tackle the second main category, the gameplay. As I said, it is traditional turn-based battling, but the big thing Paper Mario brings is the action commands, building off what was featured in Super Mario RPG. Every attack has an attached input, whether it is button mashing, stick flicking, reticle aiming, or timed presses. The classic attack for this game is the Super Stomp, or Mega Stomp maybe, which has Mario stomp an enemy on the head repeatedly, provided your timing on the press is right. Attacks like that, however, use flower points, essentially the equivalent of PP in other RPGs, and just like in those, FP is limited. Mario also has badge slots meant for equipping badges, naturally, with many of those badges allowing Mario additional FP-based attacks. Mario's helplers also use FP-based attacks and actions as well. In addition to HP, FP, and badge slots can be upgraded with each new level. As for Mario's friends, they receive new attacks and or actions when they upgrade at a super block. I am sure all of this information is already known by those perusing this review, but I figure reviewing it serves as a good touchstone for my talking points. I have played Paper Mario exactly twice. My first playthrough consisted of 2 separate sessions with a few years between them. I just got bored of the game, was all. Stopped in the middle of Shy Guy's toy box. And I believe the reason I went back to finish it that first time was on account of Super Paper Mario. My main problem with the game was the battle system. To be fair, I have a general aversion to traditional turn-based combat, but with Paper Mario, the developers' attempt to liven up that combat actually makes it worse. As while it may sound novel to integrate real-time mechanics into the mix, and perhaps it is novel initially, the end result is longer fights, and not only longer fights, but fights that require more of your attention. Mind you, not a lot, but more than the bare minimum. So for small, inconsequential fights, you are not afforded the right of mashing through them. Here is my main thought on this. There are tasks in games that are low effort and low stimulus, like riding a horse through Hyrule in Twilight Princess, or sailing in Wind Waker, or the grind of caves in Pokemon Blue. And you can look at those and say that they are underdeveloped and need to be more stimulating. But if these interstitial instances are innately low stakes, low energy affairs, when you beef up those segments, more than likely, it will put them in this awkward no man's land between dull and strenuous, leaving them all tangled up in the barbed wire of tedium. And that is how I would describe the smaller battles of this game. Victory may be a foregone conclusion, or maybe that's not the right use of the word foregone. Victory may be an inevitable conclusion, but you still have to go through the motions with these real-time actions, because if you do not, your attacks will be far less effective. So the threshold of engagement has been elevated, but on account of these real-time attacks not exactly being Street Fighter kinds of inputs, it is not nearly elevated enough to be satisfying, especially after 10 hours of it, let alone 20. It is also obnoxious that trivial enemies will give you no XP, but still will aggro at the sight of you, rather than fleeing. Such encounters are truly a waste of time, as weak enemies in old areas actively hinder revisiting said areas. Not that there is much cause to, though. Bosses fare a lot better, as not only the stakes are higher, with the increased likelihood of being killed to death, but also because bosses feature their own special gimmicks and even rhythm. Not the most fun I've had in a game, but the bosses, dare I say, are engaging. Usually the bosses highlight the attributes of the partner character found within, perhaps even needing to be exclusively defeated by them. A good example of the bosses is Huff and Puff. I'm not sure that's his actual name. Even so. Um, maybe. I could look it up, but I choose not to. He is a cloud with a handful of powerful attacks, but to focus on killing him, when you hit him, smaller cloud enemies fracture away from him, causing Huff and Puff to shrink. These smaller enemies can do you harm, but the main concern is that Big Papa Cloud can reabsorb his little ones. A lovely homage to Greek mythology, no doubt. Luckily, Lackluster, your Lakitu friend, has an FP attack that is a barrage of spike balls, able to hit all on-screen enemies, both in the air or firmly set. And these break-off clouds have little for health, so one barrage will suffice. Items like Thunder Rage or Star Rush will also do the job if you want to increase the punishment or are low on FP. Huff and Puff can break your pattern by forcing you into defense, albeit an uncertain defense, but shrink him down enough and the day will be won. So that's one highlight of Paper Mario. The bosses are alright. But there are other issues yet with the gameplay, a big one being the reduction and simplification of your party. You are only allowed one party member at a time, and each of them only upgrades twice. And with those upgrades, there's only one additional move that they learn. bringing their total moves to 4, if I'm not mistaken. Then there's Mario, who unlocks a lot more, but aside from the Star Spirit powers, which are pretty basic, most of his attacks revolve around a hammer or a stomp, with many badges being only variations of that, and the rest being passive abilities and or immunities. All of which is very useful, and it does allow a fair degree of customization. But compared to Pokemon's evolutions and TMs and Final Fantasy's job system, it seems slight. And with only 2 characters fighting, the team build component is simply not there. No extrapolation required. Thinking about my time with Pokemon Blue, I stand by my complaint about the game treating you like a baby with its 1-type gyms and 1-type trainers. But the single aspect that kept the battling interesting was maintaining my crew of 15 or so Mons and having 6 of them in the chamber for battle. And every so often one of them evolves or you get a sweet TM, but that particular Pokemon does not have the room, so you have to make a choice, let's say between a real duster with low PP or a reliable move with high PPP. Just PP, rather. Sorry. And decisions like that will pile up as the game continues. So between that, new Pokemon and existing Pokemon evolving, there's a lot to look forward to regarding your team. Paper Mario, on the other hand, does not really have that element in it. The only decision making there is which stat do you want to beef up when you level up? What badges do you want to equip in your limited badge slots? And which partner do you want to use? That is really the end of your choices, aside from items you want to purchase whenever you're at a store. That is all I have to say about that. I could probably touch on the game's other design aspects, like its world design and level design, and how I think that the environments were more designed around looking nice than being a functional game space. But there's not much more to say than just that. I mean, that really kind of sums it up. So, with almost everything quantified and qualified, how does it all mix together? Speaking in a linear line, the prologue was solid, lots of good papercraft on display. Chapter 1 was solid on account of the first dungeon. Chapter 2 was large, empty, and directionless, also full of enemies, all of which is fitting for a desert, if not terribly interesting. But the dungeon was made quite beautiful by its ancient Egyptian aesthetic. And the boss is my favorite character design in the game. Like, he's a Koopa, but he's got the it's not a hem. It's like the cobra looking crown that the Egyptians wear. He looks great. You know, it just really fits a Koopa with his golden yellow Koopa face. Chapter 3, getting back to it, was my favorite. I enjoyed the Boos and their Boo house, and I enjoyed the disheveled medieval village, and the giant manor as well. I like that the manor is about stealth, and that they made the space to reflect that. It is the best chapter in the game, whereas Chapter 4 might be the weakest. Chapter 5 is decent, that being the jungle with a volcano. Chapter 6, which includes the beautiful flower fields, is actually very tedious and aimless, with a bad structure and lots of back and forthing in narrow areas with respawning enemies. Chapter 7 has the strongest dungeon gimmick, featuring an ice palace with mirrors in the backdrop. Only the reflection of our characters do not reflect what they are doing. Bowser's Castle is the worst level, as it is 1.5 to 2 hours of pure combat, which, as I previously determined, is the weakest part of this game. And even the final fight against Bowser is not good. Not to discount the duels happening beside each other. Bowser against Mario and Peach and Twink against Cammy. Yes, his name is Twink. Regardless, the main fight is a simple slugfest between you and Bowser, wherein he has lots of health and the ability to heal himself. What a bucket of laughs that is. It is not hard, just dull. Now, if you are someone who really likes or loves this game, first off, you are not alone, and second, you probably put a lot of stock in the additional mechanic and instances outside of the fighting, because they provide a break off the pace and insert variety to keep everything fresh, including the battling. I would agree to a very small extent. They are there to do that, but when the dungeon puzzles are very one-dimensional, with no progression and complexity, and the partner actions you perform in the world, they're so stilted and obvious. What amount of variety is really injected? Yes, there is the Peach sections, which punctuate the adventure, and they have these fun little moments, like baking a cake, tricking Bowser, or being part of a game show. But given my description of the cake section, is that really balancing the scales? How much stock does that really have? I think people have a tendency to latch onto one aspect or even instance, and that one thing overrepresents the experience in their mind, both in hate and love. And no one can accuse me of that, because the aspect I take umbrage with is the very bones of Paper Mario. The primary interaction of Paper Mario, the combat, is not only too simple, it is too slow as well, and too involved, while at the same time not being involved enough. And a cake baking section does not thwart that issue. As for the visuals, they are remarkable. While this is a game on the N64, it looks great without qualifier. They put so much care and engineering into the visuals. In fact, I learned this playthrough that the backdrops of the battle screens will change according to your environment. If you are by the waterway of the sewer, sure enough, a flat cutout approximation of that will be in the backdrop. Or when you discover Bowser's rain-making machine and fight the minions running it, there it is in the backdrop. Most RPGs do not do that on their battle screens, so I really appreciate that extra work. And in general, it's just very charming, the little backstops or backdrops, fake walls, whatever you want to call them, that they set up for these battle scenes. There's like a little fake sun, a paper sun in the sky, in the desert, that's just on a string and moving as you're fighting, just as one example. And it's just cute. So I think on that note, I've said everything, and so we are going to go ahead and stick a review score on this. Being perfectly honest, I would prefer not to be a contrarian and simply slap a 7 out of 10 on Paper Mario, aka calling it a good game. And as faint a praise as that might be, it is still praise enough so as to be thrown onto the heaps of praise that this game has already received. Nevertheless, I will not concede even that small degree, because that is dishonest. Paper Mario is a 6.5 out of 10, because it is almost a good game. It looks great, the dialogue is good, the combat has its moments, and it is all around a very charming adventure. but the gameplay is too dull and simplistic in regard to both immediate enjoyment and prolonged satisfaction. Moreover, said dull gameplay is too prevalent throughout to be downplayed. So, it gets a 6.5 out of 10. Now, should a Paper Mario aficionado stumble onto this review and be in vehement disagreement, reach out in the comments or at the email nalistenerq@gmail.com. Make your case. I'm not infallible, and should your argument compel me, I will actually amend the score. With that said, that concludes my review of Paper Mario. Okay, ranking time. Where do we put Paper Mario? We shall start in the 6.5s camp, of course. Starting at our list at number 26. Is it better than Perfect Dark? I would say so. As I said, Perfect Dark's multiplayer is very fun, though given the fact that there are much better arena multiplayer shooters like Nightfire, that really doesn't hold that much water. I mean, there is certainly its idiosyncrasies, but you know, it is a really weird control scheme to get used to. So, aside from the multiplayer, because the campaign kind of sucks, yeah, I'd say Paper Mario is better than Perfect Dark. Is Paper Mario better than Mischief Makers? I would say so. Mischief Makers is a very ugly game with some very good levels, but it's never truly great with its level design, I guess. I don't know. I would say I enjoyed Mischief Makers more than Paper Mario in terms of gameplay, certainly, but Paper Mario is a bigger game with more stuff going on. And, you know, the stuff that it's doing, the aesthetic and all the dialogue and just its very novel concept, it makes it better than a fast-paced, albeit ugly, arcade game. So yes, it's better than Mischief Makers. Is it better than Turok 2? Honestly, I would probably rather play Turok 2 than Paper Mario, personally. But Turok 2 does have some really great levels, and the game looks really good. It's one of the best looking N64 games. But yeah, I'd probably, while I might eventually acclimate to the controls of Turok 2 and have more fun with it, I think Paper Mario is still better. Like, a lot of the stock I'm putting in the game is just its visuals. The visuals are great on Paper Mario. And so I think Paper Mario is better. Is it better than Beetle Adventure Racing? Again, great visuals for Paper Mario. Beetle Adventure Racing has a really cool hook, but that hook compromises the rest of the game and leaves you only with 6 tracks, and as big and vast as they are, eventually, if you want to win, you're going to start avoiding certain paths that don't make your runtime shorter, so you're kind of just going to be racing one small, narrow strip at some point. And you're racing one of 6 narrow strips. So Beetle's Adventure Racing, kind of competitive, or not competitive, repetitive. Still races really well. Much funner game than Paper Mario. This is a hard one. Paper Mario is much better looking. But, I mean, thinking about it, I played Beetle Adventure Racing 1-player. If you were playing it 2-player, which you can do, which I assume you are encouraged to do, all of a sudden that variety of paths you can take becomes a lot more interesting. And the game is considerably more enjoyable mechanically than Paper Mario. And, you know, there are lots of sights to see, even if it's far less visually interesting than Paper Mario. I think if you think about 2-player, that would make the game a lot more enjoyable. You could really engage with the bigger maps that way. You kind of just make your own rules and experiment with the other player in a way that you wouldn't by yourself. I'm going to say Paper Mario 64 is not better than Beetle Adventure Racing because gameplay is more important than aesthetic. We don't play aesthetics. We can look at them, but we don't play them. And playing games is about playing. So that has a bigger, there's a greater impetus to make a better playing game than a better looking game. So Beetle Adventure Racing is better than Paper Mario. And that argument would not apply to Mischief Makers because Mischief Makers is actively ugly. If it was made of sticks and cubes, I would maybe say it's better than Paper Mario 2, but gosh, that game's ugly. So it's a demerit rather than just a non-factor. Just in case someone was thinking I was hypocritical. So yeah, we're going to put Paper Mario between Beetle Adventure Racing and Extreme G, which we didn't even talk about at all. I would say Paper Mario is also better than Extreme G. Extreme G, it's not as interesting as a racer as Beetle Adventure Racing, though it does have a more appropriate amount of tracks. It still feels very fast and more enjoyable than Paper Mario, in my opinion, but again, you have dialogue and that beautiful aesthetic. It edges out Extreme G. Extreme G's gameplay isn't fun enough to be better than Paper Mario's aesthetic, which is Paper Mario's aesthetic is marvelous. I'm kind of playing it by ear because, it sounds like I'm being contradictory. But I'm not. It's just that I don't think Extreme G's gameplay, while it's better, it needs to be even more better than it is. Because its mechanics, its structure is simple, and its aesthetic is also, it's cool enough. I mean, it serves its purpose, but it's not very interesting. So, given all the other things that Paper Mario has going for it, even though its main gameplay isn't very enjoyable, Paper Mario will sit between it and Beetle Adventure Racing. And that will conclude our ranking process. So, going from the bottom, at number 36 we have Conker's Bad Fur Day. At number 35 we have Turok 3. At 34, Banjo-Tooie. At 33, Bomberman Hero. At 32, 007, The World Is Not Enough. At 31, the original Turok. At 30, Super Mario Party 2. At 29, Donkey Kong 64. At 28, Jet Force Gemini. At 27, Yoshi's Story. At 26, Shadows of the Empire. At 25, Perfect Dark. At 24, Mischief Makers. At 23, Turok 2. At 22, Extreme G. And 21, Paper Mario. At 20, we have Beetle Adventure Racing. At 19, Battle for Naboo. At number 18, GoldenEye. At 17, Sin and Punishment. At 16, Ogre Battle 64. At 15, Mario Tennis. At 14, Doom 64. At 13, Mario Kart 64. At number 12, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. At number 11, Pilot Wings 64. At number 10, Smash Brothers 64. At number 9, Kirby 64. At 8, Wave Race 64. At number 7, Rogue Squadron. At number 6, Star Fox 64. At 5, we have F-Zero X. At 4, Diddy Kong Racing. At 3, Banjo-Kazooie. At 2, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And at number 1, keeping its crown, Super Mario 64. That is my ranking as such. Now, going forward, we only have 2 other games we're going to be putting on this list. And then after that, we are done with the N64 era of Nintendo. Thank goodness, I'm just going to say. I've been playing N64 games for 3 years, with one sizable break in between there, but maybe even 3.5 years. So, yeah, we're going to be done it. Anyway, that will conclude our show. To those who listened or watched, thanks for doing so. I hope you tune in again, and have a God bless day.